Welcome, everybody. I'm Jay Bykowski, the chairman of the Finance Committee, and I've been asked to be the moderator for this session this evening. And we welcome everybody here, and we introduce our Select Board Chair, Roxanne McCaffrey, Chuck Cardillo, Patrick White, and our Finance Committee, Diane Roos, Steve Schatz, Neil Holden, Bill Vogt, Pam Boudreau, and Jim Balfance is on remotely. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us and coming out on this difficult evening. The first order on the agenda, Chair McCaffrey will discuss the fair share amendment. Chairman McCaffrey.
In regards to the fair share amendment, we had a request to support and a request for placing this on the warrant, and the select board will take no action.
Okay, so
good.
no action on this.
No action on this particular.
Fine.
I'm sorry, can you explain what this is?
In, I think it was our last select board meeting, we had a gentleman come in and they talked about the fair share amendment. This is actually a state ballot question that will be on the state ballot. And we were requested to recommend or endorse the fair share amendment. Basically, I know that Patrick spoke to it in the last meeting, that he's perfectly comfortable that we don't need to be telling people how to vote. And because it's going to be on a state ballot, that we would not be
What's
inclined to put this.
share? I'm sorry.
4%.
Oh, it's-
They're proposing a 4% surtax on earnings over $1 million.
Oh.
So it's a more progressive.
Right.
Yeah, if you make a lot of money, you pay a little more.
Right. Bottom
But
line
it's
is
not my job. Well,
we heard one side of this.
Yeah.
It is a state ballot question that will be coming up in November, so we will take no action.
Okay, anything else on that topic? If not, we'll move on to, we have two sets of minutes that we have to approve from the Finance Committee. The first set is the 17th of March. On that date, we had two members who were unable to join the meeting, Diane Roos and Neil. Basically, the one comment on the minutes that I did receive is on the various categories, like the pump station and some of the capital items. If we could itemize those categorically and change the minutes, I have no objection to that. And therefore, other than that, may I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Okay,
I'll second that.
first, Schatz is second. Any discussion, further discussion? There being none,
We need to do a roll call because
we have to have a roll call vote. Jim,
Aye,
you approve, okay?
yes.
Bill?
Yes.
I abstain.
Right, Steve? And myself. So we have 5-0, 2 absent. That is.
I wasn't there at this one though,
And Bruce.
the second one here.
Okay, the next one are the minutes of 3/23. That is the exit audit that we had with our auditors, Adelson and Company. I did receive comments on that to the extent that basically in future audits, could we show comparative figures from the prior year? That's something we can bring up to the auditors as we move forward. Other than that, can I have a motion to approve that set of minutes?
So moved.
second.
And a second?
Second.
Did you make, okay. Any further discussion? There being none, we had a full committee for that. So we'll take a roll call vote on that. Diane?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Neil?
Yes,
Bill?
Yes.
I wasn't there.
Pam was not there, right, I'm sorry. And Jim?
Yes.
And myself, yes. So 6-0. Pam absent. Okay, now we have a number of categories that we have to discuss this evening. One of them deals with several of our departments' budget requests, the operating budget, the capital budget, and warrants. Michael, do you want to start out with the presentations from the departments? Is that appropriate, or?
Whichever department you would like to move forward.
I think the first one we ought to start off with is school. Peter?
Okay.
Come on up.
Either sit or stand, either one.
It's okay, I'll just sit.
There you go.
So there are two things. First of all, thanks for letting me join you. And there are two things I was hoping we could have a conversation about tonight. One is just sort of the budget and context for it. I know you had a meeting and had a lot of questions and actually put together a giant memo that addresses everything and gives you real good granular detail. So that's one. The second one is connected to a potential high school project, and the good news we got from the Massachusetts School Building Authority and some context on that. So I'm happy to talk to either one first. Which one would you like to hear about?
Why don't you start off with the budget itself?
Okay.
Okay, because that's something, and just to, if I might, just introduce the subject. This is one of our largest allocations, if you will. And what we're talking about basically with capital and operating is a $433,318 increase over the prior fiscal year. So that,
Yeah, no, it's a heavy lift and I'm sorry
Right.
about it. Let me pass some to this side and the rest to this side. I think it's enough for everybody and Michael.
thank you.
And you guys want? And I'll share copies electronically later.
Yeah, we got a couple more. Everybody, did you get one? Oops, I'm sorry, Peter. Forgive me.
So the whole bunch of things, right? And some of this stuff around what happens to towns' assessments tied to the budget are just extraordinarily complicated. But there's three things that had an impact. One, and this gets to some of your questions, is the shift from last year from 111 to 118 students, right? So the bad news is it costs you more money, and me too, now that I live in Stockbridge. The good news is there are more kids living in town. It gets exaggerated because the way the assessment happens is it's tied to the total number of students in the three towns. So Stockbridge's number went up as Great Barrington's number went down. So the percentage that Stockbridge is paying goes up in an exaggerated way. So that's one piece of it. The other thing that's tied to it, and this is the part that's really complicated, is this thing called the minimum local contribution. So the state has a formula that's tied to the assessed value of communities, and we always pay much more than the minimum, but Stockbridge's obligation under the minimum local contribution went up almost $250,000.
And that's based upon
The assessments and sort of.
real estate assessment.
Right. So the thinking there, and again, it's really complex, but that each community, and I'm trying to not use the fair share thing because you had a big debate about the fair share thing, but each community has a minimum obligation to pay, and that's how it's calculated. So those two things come together, and it's a big increase, right? If your eyes are good enough, you can look at this table over years. And many years we've had an actual decrease in Stockbridge or or a negative increase. So look at the yellow highlight thing in the bottom part of the chart. So there's the dollar amount, and then next to it is the percentage amount. We went back 6 years because 6 years fit on a page. So this year it's just big. The year before was 2.25. The year before that it was negative 1.74. It was negative 4.7, and it was 1.6. There's also, and it fell or is about to fall into your free cash. We hit like free cash, regional school districts have something called excess and deficiency, and we can only have 5% of our budget in there. We went over this past year because of COVID and grant funding and other things. So we returned some money to you this year, and I don't remember off the top of my head what it was, but $75,000, something like that. Okay.
That was to Stockbridge, Peter?
Yeah, and Michael, do you remember what the exact?
I don't remember what the exact.
But it's around, it's somewhere between 75 and 100. So if you want to, in some complex way, give us credits, you could, and maybe as I present this at the town meeting, I do some math around it and say, well, it's this increase is really $100 or $100,000, $75,000 that we gave back. So it's not really going to be a 14% increase. It's going to be a 11% increase.
And hey, Jay, just a point I'd make is that of the $460,000 increase, probably half of that is due to what Michael pointed out at our last select board meeting, which is the assessments went from the median assessment went from 525 to 600,000. And that is a part of the formula.
Local assessment.
That's right.
MLC.
And so half of this increase is due to the fact that we're seeing robust increase in our property values.
And basically, just to clarify this for everybody, that is the law. There is that's state law.
State law.
There is no way to get around that.
Right.
Well, okay, because we get questions,
Yeah, no, I get them. I get them too. And it's unusual. And several years ago, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, some towns do, this is an anomaly, right? So it goes up and down a little bit, and then it went way up. Some towns do this on a 5-year rolling average, and we looked into doing that, and we ran the numbers for the past 10 years when we did it, and it didn't make sense to do it on a 5-year rolling average. If this happens again, then we may want to talk about doing it on a 5-year rolling average. And 1 year, West Stockbridge had a few more people and their assessments spiked a little, but this is unusual. So I'm open to doing that if you want to have a conversation about it. I think we'd have to bring together a lot of people to make that shift, but it's something we could potentially do.
Does that have to be approved by the state education department?
I need to check on that. So the last time we approved like the amended regional agreement, state ed needed to do that. This is a more technical thing. So I don't know that the state has to approve it, but I'll look into that.
One question I have is it based on the population of school-age children or the actual number of school-age children who attend the public schools? Like, in other words, do private school students get counted in this anyway?
The private school students get counted in some things, but they don't get counted in this, in this thing. All right. So that's sort of the first page. The other thing you'll see that's sort of interesting is in the top, this is the list of where all the kids are and in what grades. So you sort of see the distribution. We oddly only have two. The P is for pre-K, 0 EK, 6 kindergarten, then 6, 8, 5, 8, 4 as I go across. 7th grade has a lot of students from Stockbridge, 13, and 9th grade has a decent amount. 11th and 12th grade both have more. The 12th grade class is graduating. They're the first class that was here when I was here, and I made a mistake with the interim principal, and we accepted too many kids in EK and didn't count them right. So that graduating class is like 150, and all classes going forward will be like 120, 130. So that's some context. And then the third item that influences the assessment are the capital budget. There were a lot of questions about choice and tuition, and just to summarize the difference between the two, the state has like 5 mechanisms where students can travel between districts. And the simplest is choice, and anybody who lives in Massachusetts can go to any other school in Massachusetts if they participate in a lottery. And then we pick people, and then the sending school pays us $5,000 per student. And the metaphor I usually use around that are empty seats on an airplane, that you're flying the plane, you have a pilot, there's fuel. It makes sense to fill the empty seats, but you don't want to have one more passenger or one more student to force you to create another class and then fly another plane, because then you get in trouble, right? Then it's economically inefficient. And you'll see on other pages, and I'll point to them, the number of choice students. We get many more kids choicing in than choice out. And I think that's a sign of quality and that people are drawn to our programs.
Just an interesting statistic, I happen to have the numbers of the total 1217
Right.
students, 271 are choice students.
Right.
And state law suggests that of that 271, a reimbursement rate of $5,000 per student is given to the school district.
Right. Now, what's crazy about that is that number hasn't changed since 1993 when ed reform went into effect. And obviously, the cost of educating a student is much more than $5,000. I've brought this up I stopped bringing it up a couple of years ago, but for 12 years, I brought it up all the time at any state meeting I was at. And in most places, the number choicing in and choicing out is the same. And politicians don't really want to go out on a limb, because if they raise the number, then they're advantaging the schools that draw kids, and they're almost condemning the schools that lose a lot of kids to going out of business, right? So if you looked at it from like a competitive business standpoint, the number should be much, much higher, but there's no interest in doing it. And I've tried a bunch of times. The one redeeming thing is if a student's coming with a need for additional services like learning disabilities counseling, we can charge the sending community additionally for that. So if we get a typical student, we get the $5,000. If we get a student with severe dyslexia and they need tutoring 4 times a week, we can charge the $5,000 plus that on top.
One question that has come up before you get into the capital, or this may be part of the capital, Peter, is the school committees passing and approving the hiring of a public relations specialist.
Yeah.
I think you should comment on that.
will.
Why do we need that?
Yeah, can I save that for the end?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And-
I just wanted to put it on the agenda.
It's totally on my radar, and it's probably the thing that I get asked
Right.
about the most. Right, but let me get to it. So the other vehicle is there are 2 adjoining districts that don't have high schools. Farmington River, Otis, and Sandusfield ends in 6th grade. So they send kids to us from 7th to 12th grade. And Richmond ends in 8th grade. So they send kids to us in 9th grade. With both of those communities, we have tuition agreements that we negotiated, and the numbers are just around $10,000. The middle school rate's a little less, and the high school rate's a little more. And excuse the typo, the double dollar signs on Richmond, but so a little more than $10,000. We also can charge them for their discreetly for their special education costs. So that's a little bit better. The other ones, just to give you context on, occasionally a kid goes to a vocational program and an approved vocational program. And the mechanism around that is they can charge, and they don't charge the school district, but they charge the sending town the full cost of that, which is around $18,000. So every once in a while, we'll have a kid go to Taconic or Smith Vocational, like on other side of the river. And they can charge us the full amount. We have two Chapter 74 programs, automotive and horticulture, and we're in a position to start charging people more for that. In the context of the building, I'll tell you more about that, but we're hoping to go from 2 to 6 approved vocational programs. And that should be both a revenue source for us and a real set of opportunities for kids and also for those young people to go into the trades. And we know we need.
I think that's terribly important.
Yeah.
Terribly.
Why is the tuition to those two towns so much less than the per capita cost to the 3 towns in the district per student?
I just want to say we've come a long way. So when we started, it was around $5,000 or $6,000, and the superintendent who was representing those communities was really good at it. And finally, we're sort of catching up. But the increase has been 3, 4, 5% a year, and it needs to accelerate more, right? So every time we do negotiations, it'll come up. It's just taking a little while to do that. Any questions? I know I'm talking a little fast. So just so you know, there are 2 other mechanisms around tuition. If somebody goes to the charter school, the BART charter school, and there's only one, the charter school is able to charge almost the full value, and that's a state initiative. So each sort of funding amount around a mechanism for people to go is tied to the political context in which it was created. There's also a virtual online school, which we all did for a year, but there are 2 in Massachusetts. And if somebody enrolls in that, there's a different dollar amount charged. So I'll keep arguing for the choice to go up, but I don't think it's going up. Okay.
Jim, did you have any other questions for Peter?
No, not at this time. I wanted to hear his explanation on what was it that he was talking about?
The communications role.
Yeah, the communications role. I'd like to hear a valid explanation for that. And the only reason I ask that is I've been asked that by many people who pay taxes in this town. Because if you look at, if I'm correct, if you look at the line item for the operating budget at what, 456,000 and change, if you reduce that by 50,000, that's a substantial savings in that line item. So with that,
let me explain it. This is a big enough deal. Let me pause on this, talk about the communications, and I'll come back to the rest of it. The communications position, which is something that I support, but I didn't recommend, was brought up almost at the 11th hour from our school committee. Actually, Rich Dahoney, who many of you know, brought it up. Our total budget's about $31 million, and he recommended we set aside $5,000. I'll go into the details of it, or $50,000, sorry, $50,000 to support it. And the recommendation were that the funds come out of excess and deficiency. So, Jim, while I get what you're saying about taking the 50 out of the increase, it's coming out of excess and deficiency, so it's not directly impacting the assessment.
It's surplus, prior surplus.
It's like free cash, right? It's the equivalent of your free cash. What's hard about it is, as the regional school district, each town has its share of the assessment. Another person, Jason St. Peter, Stockbridge resident, recommended at that same sort of 11th hour that we pull out another couple $100,000 from E&D to reduce the assessments. But taking out $200,000 doesn't unfortunately translate to saving Stockbridge $200,000. It goes through that whole allocation, like assessment thing, and I think it ended up being $26,000 or something. So we don't reject saving $26,000, but the move probably is more symbolic than it is financially impactful.
I might suggest, and I may be a little off base here, that it would be very helpful if with these programs, as we develop them, if the respective town representatives go back to the towns, i.e. the finance committees, and explain
Yeah.
what's happened.
Yeah.
We basically have not had any communication on this, and that's our finance committee.
Right.
And that's why you get a lot of these questions. That would be a very constructive thing to do.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do it, and a bunch of it is in this memo, but we can talk through more of it. So the thinking, as I understand it, and now we've got a subcommittee on communications that's meeting on Monday, so I'll be able to share more about it, is we see ourselves doing very important work in our schools, and we're innovative. Our budget's around $31 million. $4 million of that is grants. So we write grants constantly, all the time. The Department of Justice gave us $800,000, and the Bar Foundation out of Boston gave us $300,000, and the state keeps giving us money around mental health and wellness and all these things. So we're doing all this great work. And our internal communications are pretty solid, right? So parents and kids largely know what's going on, with maybe the exception of this thing we're trying to do in the 9th grade, which I'm working on all the time, right? And I'll tell you about that some other time. It's hours of talking. But our external communications aren't so good. We get some of the best coverage of any school district probably in the country in terms of local media, right? So the Berkshire Eagle's very supportive, the Edge is very supportive, and WAMC are very supportive. And it's rare that like a week goes by when they're not 3 or 4 articles about something the district's doing, not counting all the articles about athletics and other stuff, right? So that's really good. Our broader communications are lacking, right? So for people who aren't directly connected to the schools, we're not communicating as well as we might. We've dabbled around writing a more thoughtful annual report. We're trying to put together a quarterly newsletter. So just my neighbors know what's going on in the schools without me having to knock on their doors and tell them what's going on. So the thinking is we're spending a lot of time being reactive around communicating instead of being proactive around it, and investing $50,000 from what essentially is free cash or excess and deficiency to either hire a person or consultants to set up a set of structures and plans to internalize within the district and have people within the district do it would be really helpful. It strikes a sore nerve with a lot of people, right? The teachers are angry about it. It keeps coming up in conversations. It seems like ancillary or fluff. And the way Rich argued it is if we get up really good systems in place, then we'll be in a position to share stuff better. Our website is unfortunate, and it's sort of embarrassing when I try to recruit people that they look at it. Some of our other communications aren't great, and our work around social media isn't great. So I think there's a need to raise the bar there. And the most interesting debate, I think, is that the way we could best invest $50,000? Should $50,000 be better invested in tutoring or psychological services or counseling or any number of things?
Or programs.
Yeah. Right. So that's where we are. Jim, does that help? Did I bring up more questions?
Yeah, you answered it, and you did a very good job, but you unfortunately haven't convinced me that we should approve that 50,000. That's all.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, good. So can I go through sort of the rest of your questions and then transition to the
absolutely.
So one of the things that came up where have we been with, and this sort of gets to the losing positions and gaining positions. So over the last several years, and this one in particular pained me, we eliminated 2 positions. One was an art position at the high school, and that one's hard because I used to run an arts integrated high school before I got here. We had 3 art teachers at the high school. We now have 2. With shifts in enrollment and student interest and people doing some more vocational stuff, we're okay with that. The other position we eliminated was a social studies / business education position. Unfortunately, one of our colleagues passed away, and when he passed away, we didn't fill that role. We divided the work out among other people. So those are 2 positions in recent years that we've eliminated. We've added several positions tied to the needs of our students. One is a new school psychologist at the high school. We have previously had 1 psychologist that worked district-wide, mostly on testing. And now we added another one who's working at the high school. We added 2 social workers, one in the middle school and one in the high school, to support programs tied to students with special needs. And sort of the choice there is you pay for it in your own system, or you pay to send the kids to often very expensive private special ed program with the associated transportation costs. So we've got a small number of kids going to Northampton to private programs, and just the busing for the program is $40,000 a year. So we've worked hard to keep kids in district and meet their needs, but we need to add some staff to do it.
How many arts faculty were eliminated? Was it 2 positions?
No, just 1.
Just 1.
Right. And so there's an art teacher in the elementary school and the middle school.
Right.
And now there are 2 art teachers in the high school instead of 3 art teachers.
Got it.
And one of them's Neil Weber, and he lives down the road. We added a board certified behavior analyst, and that's somebody who largely works with students who are autistic or on the spectrum. So they help them around growing, understanding boundaries, fitting into school, and a whole host of things. And then the last one, and this has happened this year, and we've started covering it with grant funding, are adding 2 additional English as a second language teachers. So we've got an influx of immigrants, mostly Spanish speaking, and we've added 2 folks to help them. What's particularly challenging is it would be hard enough to leave here and go to China when you're in 6th grade, right? But people are coming here having missed some formal education. So they might have had schooling in their native country and native language till they were in 4th grade, then didn't have any schooling for 3 or 4 years. Then they're showing up and they're not literate in Spanish or their local language. And we need to meet them where they are, get them first to develop language skills, just like communicative skills, and then second, academic language. So that's a heavy lift and a change. We do get a little federal money to support that, and as the numbers go up, we'll get more.
Peter, can I ask you? So you're adding 7, if you add this new CVT position, I count 7 new positions.
Yeah, but-
On top of what's already there, how many school psychologists are already there?
There's 1 school psychologist, so we added 1, but she's there now. So I did this over 3 years because that's what the question was. Going into next year, the 2 new positions are the BCBA, the Board Certified Behavior Analyst, and an assistant principal for CVTE, which is just Career Vocational Technical Education. It's a vocational position, right? So in going from 2 to 6 programs, we need somebody who's dedicated to moving that work forward and supervising.
So the 2 social workers there are no social workers now?
No, they're already on board, so they're not new to this year's budget.
I see, okay.
There are
Sorry.
2 social workers in each building, and then these folks are helping out in the middle and high school around specialized programs. Okay. And I could give you our whole giant budget book, and it may be easier to have the total list of staff. We're staffed, even though it seems like a lot, we're staffed pretty leanly compared to other districts. And because we're small, people wear multiple hats. Yeah.
I just wondered, you mentioned a lot of the need for Hispanic. How many of them happen to be illegals because of all the recent border problems?
Yeah, it's not my job to check it, so I'm not even
How many,
weighing in
how
on
many
it.
Hispanic do you have in these programs?
It's about, our total number of English language learners is now about 13% of our total population, right? So.
Pretty big.
Yeah, and it's growing, and these are people whose parents work all over the place, right? They work in the restaurants we go to. They work throughout the community and really well compensated jobs and not well compensated jobs. But it's
Question?
Yeah.
Diane?
Sorry.
Well, it's similar to what Neil was asking. My question would be, and perhaps you know, you don't, how do we measure or compare to perhaps other school districts within the Commonwealth? And are we growing in that department with children having to learn English?
Yeah, very much so. So I actually have some expertise in this. A couple jobs ago, I was an ESL teacher and I did a master's degree in this a long time ago at Columbia. When I got here 13 years ago, our percentage of English language learners was about 4%. Now it's about 13%. So it's changed dramatically. The other number that's really changed dramatically is the percentage of kids who are whose families are poor, right? So it used to be we used a free and reduced lunch as a proxy for that, and when I came here, it was around 20%, and now it's about 50%. But what's complicated is the way they calculated it. They made it harder to demonstrate that you're poor. So if we were using the previous metric, maybe 60% of our kids would be poor. It's a little different at the high school because kids from Richmond feed in and they are typically more well-to-do than the base of our kids. But it's the community's really changing.
And just to be clear, though, Massachusetts and federal, I believe, states that we are required to give students an education regardless of their status.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so,
Totally.
well,
But then like compared to other communities, so we have a greater percentage of English language learners than North Adams does. But Amherst, which in some ways is very similar to us, has a much greater percentage of English language learners. There's been a lot of refugee resettlement in Amherst, and that population is really, really different. One of the things, and I'll show somebody sometime if you want, like the state is really good about collecting all sorts of data, so you could plug in our district and another district and compare them. You could do it us to Southern Berkshire, us to anybody.
Is there anticipation to some degree that this is going to continue to increase?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. But it may level off, right? It may level off at 18,
With the southern border.
at 18 or 20.
Want to move into the capital?
Sorry. The big thing with capital is we have our elementary and our middle school, which until recently we were calling our new buildings. And we're about to pay off the bonds on those buildings. And the total amount here is $1,716,875,000. In fiscal year 24, we finished paying it off. And as I start talking about the potential of a new building, it creates this really good opportunity where the commitment to the capital investment is here. if we can time it just right before it goes way down, we can substitute a potential new or renovated building there. And at least the perceived impact on us and our neighbors will be less than having a big drop off and then a big increase. So that's detailed a little bit there. The next page in this, and this is something you've probably all seen, is just the assessment sheet, and it's the bottom line, the budget. You see your increase, Great Barrington's increase is very small, which is very unusual. And Stockbridge's as a percentage is relatively small, and the dollar amounts not huge. So remember when I was talking about sort of how the assessments are determined and the 8 extra kids and what that did? If you look at the bottom box, you see Great Barrington's at 73.4884, and Stockbridge is now 13.7209. Last year, it was this weird anomaly. Stockbridge and West Stockbridge both had 111 students, so we thought we made a mistake in the spreadsheet, because it never happens and the percentages were the same, but there's a little difference there. And then the subsequent sheets, one's just the operating, one's just the capital. Sorry, this one printed a little funny. And I'll send to Michael a cleaner copy of it. But this is around
The Rosetta Stone.
no, I can't even read them with good eyes, so I'm sorry about it. But essentially what it is the choice in tuition kids in and out from each district. Okay, so that I think gets to most of your questions. Let me just look at my notes one more time. So the other thing I'm asking for your potential support on or recommendation is a warrant article. Should I talk to that now, or do you want me to wait and talk to it when you get to the warrant articles?
I would say that you talk to it now, because we're probably hitting the warrant at the end of our meeting.
Okay. So I'll talk to it quickly. So most of you remember 9 years ago when we had a proposal for an addition and renovation for the high school, and it passed in Stockbridge, thankfully, and it passed in West Stockbridge, but it failed in Great Barrington, and that happened twice. So since then, like all I do a lot in the schools, but what I spend a lot of my time doing is courting the MSBA to get them to re-accept us into their program. And we did a ton of work, and they did accept us back in. It was sort of a huge deal. I described it a couple of times as a minor miracle. They approved 17 schools to go forward in their process, and rejected 47. And before that, we'd been rejected 6 or 7 times. And why they approved us is really tied to 4 or 5 things. The first one, and probably the biggest one, and this is a hard one in Stockbridge, is we redid the regional agreement and changed the capital assessment formula. So it used to be that the capital assessment was just tied to the percentage of kids. Right now, 13 and change. And what happened in that group was we adopted what Mount Greylock had done, which was a formula that counted both the assessed value of the community and the number of kids. So essentially what it did is in the old model, Great Barrington had about 74% of the cost of a project, and Stockbridge and West Stockbridge roughly had 13%. In this new model, and it will get calculated again, so don't get too nervous yet, but maybe hold your nerves for later. Great Barrington's share drops to about 53%, and Stockbridge's goes up to the low 30s, and West Stockbridge, because it's like a statistical thing or mathematical thing, stays around 13%. So the good news is, and I think it did what that Regional Agreement Amendment Committee wanted it to do, is it increases the likelihood that Great Barrington, the community that didn't support it the first time, will support it the second time. The bad news is it puts potentially in jeopardy the likelihood of gaining support in Stockbridge, right? And we're going to have to do, I'm really going to have to do a ton of work around that. So that's one piece, and that's the elephant in the room.
And that's, the state liked that change? Is that one of the reasons we got
I think so.
became eligible?
Yes, I think so.
What's so great from the state's perspective?
I think
I think it's more likely to be approved?
they saw it as two things. They saw it as very creative to do it, and they saw it as the residents of Stockbridge putting the common good ahead of their own financial self-interest. Now, I don't know if that will hold, but at that moment when it did,
When that reformulation was approved, that was exactly the tone of the discussion and the argument
right.
in the board and also in the town meeting.
Yeah.
I was present, I can tell you.
I agree.
Yeah. No, I was too.
I know you were.
Yeah, I was surprised and happy, but I also know it's a big burden.
It's a big number, and but I wonder if our acceptance into the program has something to do with the changing demographics of the school system also.
I'm certainly, and I'll run through these quickly because I know, like, I feel terrible. There are lots of people waiting to share really good stuff. Yeah.
You mentioned 50% of the students are poor. What fraction of those would be Stockbridge?
So in Stockbridge, there are 118 students. I don't know that number off the top of my head,
Okay.
but I could look it up and share it.
What's that, the total?
No, how many of the 118 students in Stockbridge would be classified as low income?
And that 50% that he mentioned of the school district.
Right.
No, we
I
don't
have no
have that
idea.
number.
I have no idea.
I can look it up. I can share it, sure. So
Surprised.
it's surprising, right?
Yeah, I mean,
surprising.
median family income here is what, around 50? I mean, that's the 50 percentile.
Yeah. So just a couple other quick things we did. So they really liked our thinking around expanding to include 6 vocational programs, and that drew a lot of attention. They liked that we're about to retire the existing debt on the elementary and middle school. We're seeing a shift in voters, particularly in Great Barrington. There are almost 1,000 more voters in Great Barrington than there were before, and who they are has changed quite dramatically. And then the assessed value of each community has changed. Obviously, I've got a lot of work to do with people around outreach and communication. So what our school committee voted to do about a month ago, and then the Great Barrington Selectboard recommended for the warrant. Their finance committee are meeting with next, or maybe in 2 weeks, and the West Stockbridge Selectboard and Finance Committee voted to recommend is that this setting aside $1.5 million for a feasibility study. So it's an authorization to borrow to do the study. And essentially what the study is we hire architects and designers to do 2 things: to look at what our enrollment is going to be in the high school, and it'll either be in the mid-5s or the mid-7s, and I'll come back to that in a sec, and then to design an appropriate space for that. And they have to weigh, should it be a new building, a renovation, or renovation and an addition. Previously, we did the renovation, or we proposed the renovation and addition. I think other schools, both Wacona in Dalton and Taconic in Pittsfield, did new buildings. because there are a whole bunch of advantages to do a new building. It's quick. You're not phasing in things. You're not fixing things that may never be right. So it's early for me to say this, but I wouldn't be surprised if we land.
The $1.5 million, Peter, is that the total cost of the feasibility study?
Yeah.
For the system? So therefore it will be allocated for the participating communities, would it not?
Based on what percentages? The capital percentages or the operating percentages?
No, the capital percentages.
So we pay about 30% of it.
30% of that.
So it would be 30% for Stockbridge, so to speak.
Correct, right. Now what would happen is we would borrow the money likely next year. It then payments kick to the subsequent year. And if everything's aligned and we get the voters to approve the actual project based on this, then this debt would get rolled into the bigger debt. The reason we're asking for support to do the feasibility study is the state or the MSBA paid for it already once. So they, as a matter of protocol or policy, they don't pay for it twice. So they paid for it, we blew it. Now we have to pay for it ourselves.
And the old study is no good?
No, there's some information in it that we can use again. One of the things we learned, we hired a really high-end architectural firm out of Cambridge, Sims, Maney, and McKee, and they sort of designed the Taj Mahal on the hill, and we are really focused on. I walk by the fountain every day and it says on the side of it, like, utility is preferable to grandeur. We want to be really utilitarian, right? And like, so instead of building the Taj Mahal, I want to build like a cinder block palace. And I don't want to limit the architects too much, but something simple and elegant.
And if, in the event that the district mergers go through,
Yes.
would our share of the cost of building that new school reduce, or is it likely that our towns would pay to build the new building because Mount Everett's newer or whatever?
I don't know, and I really wish I could give you a straight answer on it. You've sat through those meetings with me for 2 years, right? So I'm just looking. Is Clarence still on the call?
Yeah, Clarence is there.
Okay. Those meetings are really complicated, right? And I really see 2 or 3 things happening. We get to a point where we decide it makes sense to merge, and we're right in the middle of those conversations. And if we do, then we build a school that's bigger, mid-7s instead of mid-5s. Or we decide that collectively we don't have the capacity to merge. If we decide to do something together, part of that process will be to write a new regional agreement for both of those districts. And one of the primary things to discuss will be around capital costs and what happens. And I imagine we'll segment things. We don't want to pay for the elementary preschool that has lead paint in it, and they may not want to pay for our existing elementary schools. And what we do around a high school is really up for debate. There's a space in the middle between them not paying or they're sharing the costs with us, which would be to figure out some way for them to cover costs connected around the Chapter 74 vocational programs, which they don't have right now. And then there's also an incentive, I think up to 6% of the whole project for forming a new or expanded regional district. So there could be a context where we get 6% of the project from the state for forming a new district and some contribution from them, if not the whole one. But that's to a whole level of negotiation that we're not near yet.
I think to Steve's point, though, back when we voted to increase our capital contribution, that was because we recognized the burden on Great Barrington in terms of carrying that capital investment. When we start talking about 8 towns, the idea that Stockbridge would would subsidize, if you will, 7 other towns. I think we're going to have to address that, speaking as someone,
Yeah, no,
taxpayer here.
I agree.
You know.
It's a really big deal. Really, two things are going to happen. Either those negotiations are all going to fall apart, or we're going to figure it out, right? And if we figure it out, then that's a really important set of conversations. So
Peter, can I just interrupt? In doing this plan, that's going to cost $1.5 million, what assumptions are you making about the combining the two school systems?
Well, I'd really like to come up, the typical plan would require 3 models: a new building, a renovation and addition, and just a renovation at the approved enrollment projection, because the number of kids drives, square footage drives, funding drives everything. So in the last project, it was 570 students. If it was just the 3 towns, it would probably be around 550 students right now. The combined district would require 720, 750, something like that. So as we write the request for services around the feasibility study, we're hoping to get permission from the MSBA to say, instead of 3 plans or 3 models, we want 6. Do one at the 500 and change and do another one at the 700 and change.
Well, why would you need to do one that's just renovation if you're talking about increasing the vocational program?
It's just part of, I can send you a flow chart around it, but it's part of their process that you have to go through the 3 options to get to a preferred option.
Okay.
Am I correct or incorrect in assuming that based on the feasibility study does not commit to actual construction?
No, it gives you
It's conceptual, if you will.
conceptual, and it gives you a preferred option.
Right.
And then that's what gets.
And then you would get that forward.
Voted on.
Right.
Mhm.
I just want to be sure of that.
Yeah, well, so again, this is super complicated. There are lots of moving pieces. I would recommend that you recommend the taxpayers to vote to approve the borrowing to do the feasibility study, because if that stalls, like, I don't even know what to do, right? I mean, the school committee had a plan B, which is to like fix the building ourselves. And whatever happens with the state, we get maybe 45 to 55% of it covered by the state. So that's like winning the lottery.
Do we have a projection on, for the FY23 budget as to what our percentage of the borrowing cost is going to be? Do we have that in this?
It wouldn't impact us.
It wouldn't.
It doesn't impact you.
Till 2024.
Till 2024.
That's when the debt goes off.
Oh, when the debt, I'm sorry.
Right.
Thank you.
So all the things, all our ducks are in a row.
Do you have a projection for 2024?
Well, it's a little more than 30% of 1.5 million.
No, that I understand, but
You said you're going to borrow
in
it.
terms of cash flow. I mean, we're going to borrow, we're going to pay 30% of the debt service that's associated with.
I don't think he has
22 grand.
I'm sorry, we have it, I just don't have it.
Yeah, I'm sure you have it.
Yeah, I'll have Sharon send it. Or
Okay.
I'll send it to Michael and he could send it around.
Because it's just a way of anticipating what that loan is going to look like, because we're going to pay that loan one way or another. It's either going to be rolled into the larger capital cost, or if we don't go forward, we're going to wind up paying it.
Right. Well, and I'm sure like I spent a bunch of time talking with Michael about this. He's got 2 giant monitors with like competing
I know.
Everything's costed out for the next decade.
Anything else, Peter?
No, sorry, no, that's it. So sorry, it's a lot of information. Sorry that you all have been waiting here.
Thank you for your patience. This is very, very important. I mean, this is almost a quarter to a third of our budget.
No, I know.
You know, we're concerned.
Yeah,
We
all
need
the
to
time you
know.
want.
Yep.
I really appreciate it. And I think the investment is impactful to kids, and the in the community. And there's that whole broader thing about like, as the schools go, so go the community. People continue to move here because their schools are great, right? And we're just hearing college acceptances now, and people are going to Middlebury and Tufts and UMass and the Honors College and BCC and Hamilton and all over, the University of San Diego, like all over the place. And
That kid's smart.
See, right, Jay?
Any other questions for Superintendent Dillon at this point?
Holy Cross. No.
Thank you very
Holy
much.
Cross, Holy Cross. It's one of our.
Thank you.
watchers.
yeah, thank you all.
Thank you, Peter.
Peter. Excellent discussion.
Yeah, very good.
Chief? We're introducing Chief Garofoli to talk about his budget request for capital request FY '23.
Good evening, members of the board, members of the finance committee. Thank you for inviting me back again. I appreciate it. So where would you like to start tonight? Would you like to go back over the budget from the last time and then go into capital expenditures, or would you like to pick up where we left off on the?
I think we should go right through the capital. The
Okay.
capital is the most important issue here.
Okay.
Please.
If you look over on the screen, there is a presentation that Michael has been instrumental in working with me on. If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to go through this. And if we could try and reserve the majority of questions for the end, because I think once we progress through this, you'll see a lot of things get answered as we go along. So as you can see, the first page is just telling you what we have for current apparatus. Next slide. This is telling you a little bit about our membership profile. That 15 number that is listed there is for people that we deem to be highly active, meaning that our membership has 20 members on it, but of those 20 members, 15 are the people you typically see on the majority of the calls. Next slide. This is, without putting names out there because we'd have to get permissions from people to do such, this is showing you the amount of hours of training and incidents in a point system that we amassed during the COVID time period. And as you can see, if you look down that chart, we were busy. We did a lot of training, we did a lot of calls, and your department, even though it might not have been visible, was very active. Next slide. The reason why we're here tonight for this capital expenditure is to go over an apparatus plan. Next slide. This is showing you what our call volume looks like currently.
You back 1 second?
Go back.
Yeah, just one more.
Can't see it, I've got a copy too.
All right, next slide. So this is identifying the key issues that we have currently going on. And basically, so we're on engine 2. This is a general profile of engine 2. And you can see where we've addressed what's going on and some of the reasons why it is the way it is. Next slide. So we're going over why engine 2 is being replaced. We have significant body and frame corrosion. We have OEM parts becoming harder to obtain, which is driving up the cost of repairs due to increased labor charges to retrofit newer replacement parts. And the reason being is because a job that would normally take, say, 1 to 4 hours is now taking double that or more. And when you're at $100 to $110 an hour in labor, it doubles your cost almost sometimes. Because if they don't make the part and they have to retrofit a part, it keeps going up. Just to descale and paint the frame alone and seal it to give you longevity of up to 5 years or more, you're looking at $50,000 just to do that piece. And the reason being is not the paint. The paint is cheap. It's the 200 hours, estimated 200 hours of labor that would go into that just to do that, because they have to disconnect the body, they have to disconnect the mounts. It's a very involved process. Total refurbishment would allow NFPA compliance only until 2026. So this is why we're recommending new instead of refurbishment, because your dollar per year would go up if you did a replacement. This is showing you pictures of the body corrosion. Next slide. This is pictures of the underside frame corrosion. Next slide. This is a mechanical assessment of the frame. We had it inspected independent of the normal annual. And this is telling you from the mechanic himself that it is identifying that there is corrosion, but currently the frame is still in safe operating condition. This is showing you engine one. Engine one poses its own challenges because of its years. It's in very good shape. Mechanically, it's very sound. But from recent expenditures in last fiscal year, which was fiscal year 20, we ran into a major issue in 21 as well, where retrofitting parts ended up having us needing to replace other parts in the process, and it drove the cost way up again because of OEM parts being unavailable.
And Vinnie?
Yes,
Sorry. How much did we spend in 2021?
it was right around 50 grand.
Okay.
I don't have that number in front of me to give you a concrete number, but I can give you that at a different time. Engine 5 is our tanker pumper. That has a lot of life obviously left in it. It's only 4 years old. It has its own sets of limitations and pros and cons. We'll go to the definition next slide, of what is an engine. An engine or a pumper, they're interchangeable, is a piece of fire apparatus with a permanently mounted fire pump of at least 750 gallons per minute capacity and a water tank with a capacity of 300 gallons or more, and hose body whose primary purpose is to combat structural and associated fires. We commonly use a second engine to provide backup means of fire attack and for the safety of the firefighters working on the scene. Next slide. What is a tanker pumper? A tanker pumper is an apparatus that is designed to combine some functions of both a tanker and a pumper. This type of apparatus is usually designed to function primarily as one type with the capability to serve as both types when a more suitable apparatus is otherwise unavailable. Next slide. This is showing you on a typical fire what the primary responses will be in what order. Your first do would be your engine for your initial fire attack. Your second do would be your second engine, which is either for a water source to supply the first do engine. The third do would be, in our instance, if it was just our department, a tanker pumper for tanker shuttle operations or to serve as a backup to the first do engine as a secondary water source, meaning that 1,800 gallons of water would be used on scene to assist until other water sources could be established if you're not doing a tanker shuttle. Next slide. This goes over our ISO rating and what ISO means and what it means to community. We actually are rated pretty good. We're doing well in terms of that. The dual rating is because we have sections of town that do not have municipal water supply. And in those instances, you have that dual rating. In communities, larger cities where they have all pressurized water systems and municipal water systems, that would be a single number. Next slide. We're looking to purchase a new engine. And this here is showing you with our current complement what they are, what they have for a pump, what they carry for water, and you'll see a green, yellow, and a red. The green, yellow, and red is showing you NFPA compliance. NFPA compliance states for first line pieces, 20 years. For reserve, it's the years 21 through 25. And past that, NFPA doesn't suggest continual frontline service. And the total estimated cost for replacing one frontline pumper, as we have detailed out, for the year January 1st of 2023 would be that number down below, which is $958,464. Why now? The fire department has worked to keep these trucks safe and operational well beyond their anticipated useful life, allowing the town leaders to meet needs in other areas of town government. But the need is now ours. Repairing and maintaining them has become a significant challenge. A fleet purchase will replace those trucks that are at or well beyond their useful life with equipment bearing common specifications, allowing for ease of maintenance and training for years to come. In our instance, the fleet purchase we're looking at is one vehicle. Funding, we're looking at an AFG grant. We put in for an AFG grant. I checked on FEMA Go today to see if there's any updates, and we have made it through rounds 1 and 2. So we're still in the running to get a FEMA grant for an AFG. We put in for $820,000. There will be a match of 5% if we were to get the grant. And then there would be the cost of outfitting the apparatus with hoses, appliances, and the other items that we had talked about. That would make the difference between the 820 and the 958. The town cost in that instance would be $138,000 if we were to get an AFG grant.
Does that include the 5%?
Yes, correct. But, yeah, so we'll move on to the next slide. So we have 3 options that the fire department is putting out as options for what we have going on currently. First one is to await notification of the AFG grant. Now, last year, the AFG grant went all the way up to December before round 9 was awarded. That's the reason why we used January 1st of 2023 as our projected date, and why we're using that number of 958 based on that. Because once you get told you're awarded, then it takes 30 or so days to put out your bids, so your pricing is going to be based on that time period. Now, the AFG could award next week, it could award 2 months from now, it could not award at all. We're playing essentially a card game, waiting to see what the AFG does.
Do they ever do partial awards?
If they do awards that are based on a stipulation, they will detail out to you why. It's not typical that you see that in a rural setting. You usually see that in a municipality in which they're going for multiple pieces at once, where they'll say they'll fund 50%. And it's prorated, and they have a criteria that I don't have to be able to sell that.
And who is AFG?
That's Assistance to Firefighters Grant through FEMA.
So it's a federal.
It's a federal grant.
And can Richie Neal help us get the federal grant? We should talk to him, shouldn't we?
Yes, we should.
Certainly should.
And Senator Warren and Senator, who's our other senator? I mean,
I know from looking at the grant today, there is a whole special section about lobbying, and it gets into waters I'm not sure at this level we want to get into, because it involves legal disclosures and everything else.
There are a lot of volatile issues here with respect to everybody wants a piece of this pie.
Exactly.
I.e. Williamstown.
Exactly.
Cheshire.
That's precisely why we should be talking.
No. But you know, we need to look at the aggregate and see how we move forward. Let him.
No, I would just say, you're not sure about lobbying, and we should investigate that and figure out if we can talk to our federal elected officials.
That's not the same as lobbying anyway. I mean, an elected official is
There for that reason.
Yeah,
right.
They're called, there's nothing.
that's called constituent service.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Vinny.
So we're looking at the AFG. If it's awarded, we saw what the cost would be. If it's not awarded, we would be looking at funding the full cost of the project. Now, option number 2, we wait for the AFG grant notification. If awarded, we pay that. If not awarded, we look at setting aside $250,000 per year in a dedicated stabilization account for 2 years to only borrow approximately half of what we would be looking at. And we would, at that point, have to put money into engine 2 to allow it to stay in service. And we would also have to put money into engine 5 to be able to move that up within that 2-year period to serve as a substitute for the replacement engine until it comes in. The overall turnaround time on a piece of apparatus from the time you make the decision to go to the time the apparatus is delivered is between a year and 18 months. So it's a long time. So even if you wait this 2 years, you're still looking at close to 4 years before you're accepting delivery and putting it into service. So that's why that option, we would have to look at maintaining at least engine 2 through that time period. Option 3 is to continue for the AFG again. So every year that we would move forward, we would continue to apply for an AFG grant as long as they're available for replacement of this engine company. And always, if awarded, we would go to the town for that difference. If not awarded, we're still looking at that funding. Option 3 would be to continue at $250,000 per year, put into a dedicated stabilization account until we've reached the approximate total replacement cost of around $1 million. That would put everything out between 4 and 6 years by the time you get everything back, bidded, delivered. So in that case, you would definitely have to put in the money in engine 2 to try and extend it as long as we possibly could safely, and put it into a backup role after a year or two once we can get everything squared away, and put money into engine 5.
Oh, engine 5 is the pumper tanker?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So.
Are you ready for questions?
Sure.
Okay. May I?
Please.
The first thing I would like to know is whether or not the select board has made any decision about replacing this engine. Because typically, what we as the finance committee do is wait for a decision to be made by the select board before either approving or disapproving that expenditure.
I can ask my question.
We have not formally.
You have not, okay. I just want to understand what the process is. And I do have some questions for you, Chief.
Okay.
You gave us a handout a couple of weeks ago, sort of responding to a series of questions that was furnished to you
Yes.
some time ago. And in it, you talk about having 20 active members.
Yep.
Now, tonight, you've told us that you have sort of 15 super active, or whatever that means. We're not
Highly active, correct.
highly active, thank you. I don't understand what the word active means in this case, because you've given us two different numbers, you've qualified it now, but I have no idea what that means. How do you determine what the level of activity is in order to guarantee that you have sufficient volunteers?
Okay. So I can answer the activity question first, which if you don't mind, I'll address that.
Please do.
So when I had initially written that article, I put in the total number of members. I didn't specify what active truly meant. And when I went into this, I looked at, we were going over at the time, what it would look like for potential reimbursement for a membership based upon COVID. And we looked at activity levels based upon training and upon call response. So in specifying what call response and training would look like, that's what drove what we classified as active. So what we classified as active was, in that instance, was at least over 20 points. So when you do that out, that's where you get the 15.
20 points of what?
20 points means 20 hours in that one calendar year, meaning that between calls and training, they did at least 20 hours of work for the fire department.
And in that group of 15 highly active, what is the highest number of points that one of your?
This is just through the.
I can't read that from here, I'm sorry.
This is just through the COVID time period. So I don't have that number sitting in front of me right here.
I mean, is it 100?
It's more than that.
Oh, 200?
500,
Some of them, do we?
700.
Yeah.
700. So
Well-
the most active member has 700 points?
Yeah, you can take that one out, that's me, so you can take that one.
Okay, so who's the one just below it?
Michael, don't you have the detail report?
494.5.
That's the total or the highest?
The highest.
That's 500.
Okay.
Okay, so let's say 500, okay? So it just strikes me that it's very difficult to characterize 500 points. That I can understand as highly active. But when I look at 20, I don't even get close to that. That's number one. The second part of the question is, how many of the 15 will retire, face mandatory retirement within the next 3 years?
So of those people, at the time, we had when I first sent you the sheet the last time, 2 weeks ago, unfortunately, since then, somebody has aged out. So that number has changed from 8 to 7 that were over the age of 60. And of that 8, I don't have the paper sitting in front of me. I believe it's 4 people that are over the age of 65.
Currently. And the age out age is 65? 70. So we have 4 who will be required to leave the force in the next 5 years. And which will bring us down to 10 approximately?
If we have 0 people come in the door between now and the time those people retire.
Well, that's the third question.
Yep.
And that's about what level of recruitment have you been able to achieve to increase the number of active members?
In the past 3 years, we've had 9 new members come in.
Yep.
And 3 of those new members left, not by anything that we could do. They moved out of the area. Moved out of the coverage zone, moved out of the area. So we have retained 6 of those 9 that have come in for an average of 2 per year. So if we were to maintain that average, we would still maintain the current staffing levels for the next 5 years or more.
Okay. Now, in the handout that you provided us with a couple of weeks ago, what became clear was that of the 10 true fire calls, if you will.
Yes.
7 of them were mutual aid to which we responded. We responded with mutual aid assistance to other communities, leaving 3 where mutual aid did respond from other communities. I believe you said 2 of them?
3.
There were 3 in total.
Yeah.
But were all 3 responded to by mutual aid?
2. The chimney fire, we brought in a ladder company from Lennox.
Right, and the camp
Mackinac fire, there was a lot of people there.
There were a lot of people. And the fire was put out by whom? I mean, who was actually spraying, excuse me for, I mean,
I don't really have a good answer for
were
that.
our engines actually on the site doing that work, or was it somebody else?
Everybody was there.
Everyone.
Everybody that was there was working. There was
Okay.
nobody sitting
All right.
on the wayside. There was no one department doing any one action.
I'm just trying to understand your numbers. Now, I know you have some reservations about the use of Engine 5 as the primary response vehicle. You've heard that, I've read your comments, but at the same time, we do have comments from other people and about this NFPA, that this vehicle that we have, the one that we most recently purchased, does qualify as a primary response vehicle. And I don't know, I seem to recall that we spent $450 or close to $500,000 by the time we were done buying that vehicle. And yet it only has 2,500 miles on it, on the odometer. And it's sitting there essentially fallow. So I don't understand why we're not using it. And if we're not using it, why we are continuing, why we keep it, and why we're not selling it.
Okay.
If it's one you don't want to use and you don't send out, then why are we keeping it?
That vehicle we use primarily as a tanker. So the primary use of that vehicle comes on the other side of town where there isn't water supply. And it also is responded, granted it benefits the whole community and not just our individual community, it does go out on mutual aid responses for tankers. So it's being primarily used for that response. Unfortunately, well, fortunately for the overall Berkshire County, less fortunate for this particular community in that there hasn't been a lot of request for it. And that's one of the reasons why the mileage is lower than what normally would be expected. So the overall fires in Berkshire County being lower than what we've seen in decades previous is a contributing factor to the less amount of miles on the vehicles that are there.
So other communities don't make a call for it. Isn't that what you've just said?
If they don't have a fire and they don't have a need for it, they're not requesting.
They're not requesting it. And essentially it is, again, as I said, sitting fallow in that garage.
So Steve, are you suggesting that we sell that one and replace it with the one that he wants?
If a decision is made, at least in my mind, to replace engine 2, then I see no reason why we have this vehicle.
What do you think of that?
Michael has
Go ahead,
Michael.
I know, and Chief can elaborate on this, but no matter what, our department is gonna need two, at all times, is gonna need two solid pieces of equipment, whether primary and support. Based on that vehicle that's 4 years old, it can always serve a great function if it's not used as a primary, as a secondary. And trading something that we purchased then and would maybe get half the value for.
Right.
And then we would have still two incredibly old vehicles. You're better off with two newer ones if you were to go that route. Now, I think there's still a debate of using engine 5 as a primary, which you guys need to have. But on the other hand, any thought of getting rid of engine 5, long-term, since we are always going to need two primary attack vehicles, I would not in any way recommend that. Please, Chief.
Mike, with all due deference to, when you look at the numbers with 10 calls, there's something wrong with those numbers. 10 calls, of which 7 are responses from other communities for mutual aid.
No. 7 us going to that.
Yes, no, I understand. That's what I'm saying.
Let the chair.
So
I have a couple of questions. One is, engine 2 is foam equipped,
Yes, correct.
okay?
What was that I missed?
It's foam equipped,
Yeah.
as is your heavy rescue vehicle.
Our heavy rescue vehicle does not actually have a pump. It has what's called a compressed air foam system. It's a
Right, but it does have,
stored energy
it has a
system.
foam system.
It has a 60-gallon tank that can be used for minor car fires.
Yep,
It's not primarily used for frontline attack.
yep, I understand. Now, when you're talking about remediating the rust and undercoating the frame, and we're talking, you're estimating that at $50,000, how long would that engine be out of service for that particular repair?
That would be subject to when they have availability to do it.
But how long does it take to do the job is the
It's
question.
200 hours, and I don't know, I can't predict from the
Okay.
manufacturer how many techs they can put on that to obtain that 200 hours.
Okay,
It's very much dependent on what they have going on.
okay. And another question, in terms of foam systems, because I know nothing about this, I'm not a fireman, but can you take a foam system off of one vehicle, i.e. engine 2, and place it on another vehicle? Can it be installed onto a different vehicle?
Theoretically, the answer is yes, but the same thing that we're running into with OEM parts for the vehicle is also going to be the same thing with parts that you're going to have to transfer from one system to another. And that's assuming that make, model, and line of system is still active with parts availability.
How
So-
old is that particular foam system?
This is the old age of the vehicle.
Okay, so it dates back to the
Yes.
age, okay. Thank you.
I'd like to make a couple of, go ahead, Patrick, then I want to make a couple of comments.
One, what is the chance of well, first of all, what percentage of these AFG, is redundant, so it stands for grants. What percentage of the applications versus awards that are successful are made each year? Are we looking at a 120 shot or is that 1 in 2 shot?
That varies year to year, and it varies based.
Well, varies from 1 to 3% or 50 to 80%. I mean, I want to know, we're going to play with the cards here. I would like to, understand what the odds are against the house.
Michael can speak to this a little.
I've been involved in a number of these in North County where we've applied. Obviously, it depends on the amount of applicants. It's a national program. It depends on the amount of money that's available. I would say that you're talking, if I had to make a guess, and it is a guess, I'd say it's less than 20%.
So basically, we're talking about, wishful thinking a little bit in terms of relying on this grant. Okay, so my second question is, what is on the 95 truck and the 2001 truck,
Yes.
What is the chance of catastrophic failure during a call? Are there parts on those trucks that if my house was on fire or any of the people in this room's house was on fire, that is there an increased likelihood of catastrophic failure that they would not be able to respond to that fire?
I don't think so, and the reason why I don't think so is because of the reports we get annual with our service. If we had anything that was addressed in that annual service that showed a deficiency, showed a change in the functionality of the vehicle and the parts, but beyond that, your guess is as good as mine. It's just like any vehicle. The older the vehicle, the chances of things happening will increase over time. There is weakening, there is anything that will happen, but your prediction of that is just as good as mine.
Okay, but okay.
So
it's not something to worry about.
The most important thing in regards to these two older pieces is continuing the maintenance regimen that we do. And my attitude has been in the past 3 years, as is the rest of this fire department's attitude, that any deficiency that's noted on any of these reports is considered in our mind to be immediately addressable. So we don't allow reports to come in from these maintenance reports that say you should look at replacing this and then sit on it. We replace it right then and there. If they address deficiency, we replace it.
And if we ordered a new truck today, I understand it's something like 400 to 500 days between when we order it to when we expect to deliver.
Correct, and that's from when the order's
So we're going to have to do some maintenance on these old trucks anyway. Even if we were ordered like the day after town meeting, we were still looking at, well, it's a month from now. So we're looking at a year and a half, upwards of almost 2 years before we actually take delivery.
Correct.
And finally, the truck that the 2018 truck replaced was one from the 1980s. Is that correct?
Correct.
So we basically got 30 years of life out of the 80s truck and replaced that in 2018. And now we've gotten 27 years and 22 years respectively out of the two trucks that are left. I think the taxpayers have gotten a pretty good deal from the management of this town where we've had 30 years plus 27 plus 22 years of life that we've squeezed out of the existing trucks. It just so happens that they've reached the end of their life cycle.
And the unique problem that we have, it's not necessarily a problem per se, because our job is to work around whatever we're given. That's part of the fire service. You find ways to make things happen.
Right.
But the unique situation we have in town is we have two older vehicles, and the oldest vehicle is in better shape than the next youngest vehicle. So we can't swap them around and hope that things are going to last 5 to 10 years more. Usually in the maintenance schedules that people have, you try and stagger your things out 5 to 7 years, and you rotate things around based upon use and age, so that the best years, those first few years, those optimal years, are used as a front line, and then you slide that to a secondary role. We don't have that luxury here. There's nothing that.
But we're not looking at replacing the third truck.
No.
We're looking at having
replacing
2 trucks.
Yeah.
We're going from 3 to 2.
Correct.
And we're looking at basically when that second potential new truck came in, we would be retiring both of the old trucks.
No, we would be retiring the one that's mechanically the worst.
So you keep the 95 as a backup, just in
Yes,
case.
but the caveat is this. We keep it as long as its useful life does not exceed failures or repairs. So if we were to incur another $50,000 repair bill, an estimate of that nature, at that point in time, we'd be looking at retiring that vehicle,
But not replacing it.
but not replacing it.
How many times have you rolled the 1995 engine one in a year?
I don't have that number sitting in front of me, but it has rolled on at least 30% of all fire alarm activations and anything fire-based.
Let me throw in a couple of points, if I might. I think the issue here, from my perspective, is do we need equipment? In my mind, the answer would be yes, we need equipment. The issue is also that can we do everything at once? We have high schools, we have this, we have that, we have so forth. We have a vehicle, in my mind, that has reached the end of its life. You said one of them. If it would be very helpful if we could plan a little bit for replacement, i.e. put 250,000 into a stabilization fund, wait till December, let's see what they come up with, probably won't be till the first of the year, 2023, and then move dependent upon, if we get a grant, that's great, and if we don't, then we've got to fess up and next year buy an engine. And the difference we're talking about, from my perspective, is about 6 months time on the far side. As a veteran, and Keith is a veteran, we have a number of veterans. We want to give the people who support the town the right tools to work with. That's important. But you got to cut us a little bit of slack and give us a little time to put it into a framework so we can budget for it with all these other things coming down at once. That's my personal opinion. I speak only for myself. So, and I think where this goes is, I think the select board independently and the finance committee independently need to have a conversation about what other people feel.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, I appreciate your listening, and I appreciate the questions, and I appreciate the whole process. You guys have been, the boards, the select board, the finance committee, you guys have been very pivotal in this whole process and making sure that there's transparency through every part of it. And we really do appreciate you working with the fire department.
And the bottom line, all of us here, there's nobody that would object to this. We do not want to put employees of the town at risk.
Or,
Period.
yeah.
Okay? Anybody want to object to that? I don't think so. So we want to do the right thing for our employees.
And I'll just add to that, the estimated scheduled payment on a new truck is $64,000. We're talking about potentially spending $50,000 a year on maintenance for these old trucks. And I don't understand why we're putting off necessarily. I'm open, but I'm not sure I understand why we put off a purchase to save 15 grand a year. It's going to take us 1.5 to 2 years to get the thing in place. And he's telling me the chances are 1 in 5 at best that we get this grant. I don't like those odds that
I think
great.
that's a faulty assumption to say that it's $50,000 a year maintenance on these trucks. 2021, we spent $50,000. We're not spending any more. It's in good shape, according to Vinnie in our last meeting. And now you might be talking about $50,000 to, remediate the rust situation, but that isn't going to happen every year. That's something that you're going to do. If we do it at all, it would be for the life of that truck. That truck will get replaced before that becomes an issue again.
But is there,
I mean, obviously the hope is that this doesn't happen every year, but that one $50,000 replacement cost was initially anticipated of being a $500 fix. So it was not a mechanical failure that was noted on a call. It was not something that took it out of service and left it on a record. It was in service, working. Its annual servicing noticed a slight leak. That leak turned out not to be a seal and turned out to be a cracked transfer case that you couldn't see.
But that can also happen with a brand new vehicle.
That can happen with anything.
And
The only difference with the brand new stuff usually is there's some type of a warranty that's attached. So you would hope that it would happen during your warranty period, and it's usually that 3 to 5 years. So you at least get that fit and function out of it. Whereas here, everything's out of warranty, OEM parts are unavailable. You're looking at almost retrofitting everything that breaks. So these potential $300 to $400 fixes can balloon very quickly into being something that would exceed what we would expect.
Well, we've got the AFG grant out there.
Correct.
Every year, we're going to be applying for an AFG if we don't get it.
Correct. We're going to keep, as long as that is available and as long as they are advocating for replacement of fire department apparatus as part of that AFG process, we will continue.
But what would we apply for if we fund it ourselves? I mean, we can't retro fund
We
it.
want the grant.
We want it, but I mean, I'm
We don't want to
saying,
spend that
how long are we going to put,
$800,000.
I think the question here is how long are we going to put this off?
6 months.
No, okay, that's a good answer. But,
No, I mean,
yeah.
but
because
are
I
we
agree
going to put it
with
off
Jay.
18 months? Are we going to apply next year? We're one of the 4 and 5 who don't get it?
No, but I agree with Jay. He's proposing, putting aside $250,000.
Yeah, you put it in a stabilization fund.
Right.
So you're already down from $1 million to 750. Okay,
Now,
seven.
There's the
seven and
possibility we
change.
get the grant. Now
Right.
we're good to go.
Let's be a little deliberate in our planning, and give us a chance to see what happens with this grant. We could get it.
I mean, obviously, the hope here is we're rolling the dice all the way around. We're rolling the dice with the 2 older pieces. We're rolling the
Right.
dice with the AFG grant. And obviously, we're hoping that the dice are going to roll in our favor.
And it's still going to take 18 months to get it if you ordered it today.
Correct. If we ordered it right now, you're looking at a minimum of 400-day turnaround.
And the chances are good with what's going on in the Ukraine. They haven't got chips and parts and so forth.
Your guess is
So,
as good as mine.
okay.
Maybe we can get a big fighter over at it.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on this particular point?
Yes, I have a question. Jay, I have a question, if I may. The figures that were thrown out and everybody was working around were this year's figures. And of course, they're pretty low as far as serious incidents. Could we get the numbers for, say, the last 3 years or the last 5 years to look at this? I mean, there isn't anybody on the select board or the finance committee that wants to turn something down and then have a major fire, and we're responsible for not approving this. But I think Jay's idea of going forward with a amount into the stabilization fund, moving ahead there makes sense. But I would also like to see the numbers for the last 3 to 5 years, just as a comparison to see, was this last year an anomaly in the fact that it was so low?
Well, we responded to mutual aid 7 times. We
Yes.
received mutual aid only 2 times
In that particular year, yes.
in this year. Okay.
But we also can't use past performance as future indication either, as they say in those commercials. I mean, we don't know.
It's not predictable.
We cannot predict how many serious fires we're going to have, obviously, no matter how many years we go back. There's a lot of wood structures, very iconic wood structures in this town.
I understand that, but it doesn't hurt to take those numbers into consideration.
No, I understand. Yeah. I like Jay's idea personally. I don't know about you, Chuck, or.
How do you feel, Chuck?
And Roxanne, your idea. I can live with the.
Yeah, I already opined.
Many
We
years
haven't-
ago, when our budget, the overall budget was even a whole lot less. This was in the 80s. And Keith and Doug will also know this. We used to, at the annual town meeting, there was, wasn't it $25,000 every year, come hell or high water?
You put
We would
50,000 a
put
year.
money away so that when the time came, there was money there to make a purchase. That was done religiously.
50,000 a year, yeah.
Okay,
But
go ahead.
Complete replacement plan.
I have.
Can I speak, Jay Ryan?
Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you.
Jay wants
Jay wanted to speak.
Jay was,
Who's that?
Behind,
Jay
Ryan?
Ryan.
on the TV.
Yes.
Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I just took a couple of notes, and I did want to bring up that the town used to put aside 25 or more thousand a year in a budget. That was very helpful when it was time to buy a new engine. And then, so just wanted to bring that up again. I don't know how many of us drive around in a 25-year-old or 30-year-old car, but I bet it's very few. And when we talk about serious incidents, I don't know how important it is to go back and see how many there have been over the past 3 or 5 years, because if there was a serious incident and it was at any one of your houses, that would be all that matters. I don't care if we go back 10 or 50 years. If we had a serious incident and your house was on fire, you want the best protection that Stockbridge can give you. And to me, that's the bottom line. What is your house worth? What is your life worth? What is your family's life worth? And I just don't, I think we need to focus on that. And the firefighters, the whole department, they're getting up 24/7 to take care of this town. And, everyone pours their hearts and souls into it, and you can't put a dollar amount on that either. We all want to protect you. We want to protect ourselves. And it's important to us that we're all heard as a fire department and not just a dollar sign or, a piece of apparatus or how many serious incidents we've had. That's all I wanted to say.
I think we're just looking for a little time, and we do have, Jay, one thing on our side, and that is we do have in our back pocket mutual aid agreements with other communities, if something drastically went wrong. But
yeah, but it takes time to pull all that together also. If there's a fire at your house, mutual aid is gonna, you have to rally other towns. They have to get to their stations. They have to get to Stockbridge. They have to coordinate. It's time consuming, and often we don't have time.
Anything else? I'd like to.
Yes,
Please. Go ahead, Steve. Go ahead.
Do we have a 5-year capital plan for the fire department? Because it's, putting aside $250,000 a year in a stabilization fund is okay. It's, it's not chump change, but it ought to be part of a capital plan for the fire department going forward. And that's what's missing here is any kind of 5-year look going forward as opposed to going back in time.
Well, 5-year might be a little short for fire,
that-
but it's true of all fleet.
10-year, I don't care.
Yeah, but that's true of highway as well.
All right,
In
hang
terms
on.
of fleet replacement, I think that all of these should be under, a 5 or 10 or 15-year plan where we're rolling money, as Diane said, they used to, year after year after year in anticipation of this. So, yeah, I completely agree.
What goes with that, Roxanne, is that if you don't also have a strategic plan for this department, then you can't possibly inform a capital plan either. And without strategic planning, it takes into account the manning of, pardon the use of the word, but the manning of vehicles, the availability of volunteers at certain times of the day, and so forth. Unless you're doing that, there's no sense in putting money aside because you don't know why you're doing it.
If I might close this conversation, I think your point is well taken. However, a 5-year capital plan is not going to deal with this particular issue.
Right.
We're talking about this particular issue.
Chairman Bykowski, Michael.
Well, I was just gonna say one thing. Ideally, we would have a plan that you would have your frontline vehicle in year 1 through 10. You'd have your secondary support vehicle 11 through 20. We have one vehicle that's 4 years old, and then we have the other vehicles that are facing 20 plus years.
Right.
So how we get started in that fleet schedule is what we're gonna be also dealing with the highway department. We need to get into some type of pattern. We haven't been in one, we need to figure it out.
Right.
We also do need and do understand that not just here, you can read up all over, that the challenge of volunteerism in fire departments is something that we're gonna have to probably look at over the next couple of years. Me and Chief talked about it, that it has to probably be a more regional approach, not just with our town, but looking at others and how we approach this. So it's gonna take a little bit of time for us to put together a plan, but I do agree 100%. We do need that plan, but we can't ignore the challenges that we are facing right now in both fire and highway, probably due to the lack of a plan.
And even, I might add, even with a regional plan, if you will, you still got to have equipment as part of a regional
You
plan.
still have to bring something to the table.
You
Exactly.
can't bring equipment from Pittsfield to handle a regional plan. So, and that's not that's not part of this conversation.
No, that's
an
the
aside,
logistical
okay?
component of that.
So anything else on this right now?
I have one other question with regard to the cost of the engine you're referring to. Does that cost go up as time moves along?
Yes.
Interest,
The
interest rate.
anticipated normal cost of inflation is between 5 and 10% on fire apparatus currently. This year experienced a significant jump, as did the world, in the cost of goods, being steel, aluminum, computer chips, components. They saw an extremely high cost change this year that was outside of the normal 5 to 10%. But they are not predicted to continue to go back down afterwards. There may be a momentary fluctuation, but they're still saying that 5 to 10% will continue to live on after this year as well.
Okay.
It's not kosher.
Okay, anything else? You want to?
No, just thank you very much for listening to the presentation and continuing to work with us. We really do appreciate everybody's effort and their input, and thank you.
We're looking for a satisfactory solution that all parties can accept to some degree. There's never a perfect solution, okay, in anything.
So that was capital expense number 1.
I don't think there's anything on the operational. Do we have?
No.
1 out of 8?
No issues on the operational.
Okay.
Okay.
One component before we jump on was, we started going over fire department but there is also an EMS component that is separate. That was a level funding that we were going for this year. I just wanted to make you aware that the EMS account, the 01229 account, which is separate from the 220, which is the fire department accounts, is looking at level funding this year. I just wanted to bring that up so that it didn't get overlooked. And that was the operating budget for the EMS side, which just handles the supplies and equipment for medical calls only.
Anything else for Chief?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vinny.
Have a great night.
Thanks again. You too. Thank you. Okay,
We have highway and we have park and rec. I know Steve's on and we have you right here, so I'm not sure which one you want to go through there.
okay, you want to deal with Hugh at this point? Is that okay, Hugh? Thank you again, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Hugh with Stockbridge Highway Department. And real quick, I also want to thank the Finance Committee, the Select Board, and the Town Administration, as well as concerned citizens for hearing our request. I think Mike has a slideshow for us.
Back out of this section.
Several issues have been identified which will require appropriate technical and financial planning by the respective town officials in conjunction with the highway department. Similar to Stockbridge Fire Department, there has been no formal replacement plan for highway equipment, which has led to equipment operating beyond its intended life cycle. The lack of formal fleet replacement cycle has caused extensive repairs and opportunities during inclement weather. The current replacement, this is, I was asked to prioritize the fleet or the request of what the highway is asking for. The first thing is, would be another snow fighter. I learned as a teenager, I'd rather push a dirt bike off the mountain and drag a snowmobile off in the winter. So we gotta be able to fight snow. You can't lean on anybody else during the winter. They're all very busy. And when we've had 2.5 trucks go down during the storm, it's quite hectic, you know. So I think the priority would be to secure our snow fighting ability. This truck here, we brought in last year. We were fortunate to find this truck. I got a lot of time at home campaigning for this as well as Mr. Canellis working with me to try to get this truck in place. That truck was 150,000 last year. It's already gone up to 167 and still climbing. That has filled the niche better than I thought it would when we first got it. There was a lot of few critiquable things about it, but we learned that some of the things actually turned out to be good. And our next build, we know how to tweak things to better fit our area. So that would be a priority, would be snow fighting capability would be the first, as well, it'll be an all-season truck as well. When during the summer, we'll utilize it for road maintenance in the other 3 seasons. Second would be to work on our sidewalk maintenance ability and be able to streamline how we're doing sidewalks. I know we're doing a little bit more sidewalk than we had before. This machine is just under 4 foot wide. It'll fit on our sidewalks a little better. With the implements that we're asking for with this snow blower, a sweeper, forks and a bucket, we'll put a tailgate sander on it so we can, adjust our salt usage on the sidewalks. We can control that a little bit better. So that would be the second. Third priority, I know people are probably wondering why I would put a plain 1/2 ton ahead of a 3/4 ton or a 1 ton. And there's a few real quick things. Number one is safety. We have a 3/4 ton pickup that we have a plow and a sander, which we had to utilize as basically a snow fighter this year. That I need a piece of equipment. You guys must see it out on the streets there, picking up the garbage. We throw our trash in the back of the sander, and then we got guys climbing on the side of the truck trying to get the garbage out of the sander. So I think safety's number one. Cost of the unit would be number 2, and cost lane per mile of running that truck would be a lot less. So that is kind of why I wanted to do that. I wanted something that was dedicated for that use, pulling the mowers around in the summertime, during all seasons trash pickup and other things as well, and it'd be a cheaper way to do them fast. So. And the fourth would be a backhoe. That is a staple in every highway department. I drove that backhoe down the road and I was happy to get it back in the yard. And I says, I'll never let this thing back out of the highway garage. It shouldn't be allowed out of the yard. I asked for maybe a used backhoe. I've been campaigning and talking with Pat. I think that I can get us a new machine with the trade-in and with the purchase in state power, get us into a new one for the same money. That machine there, we can use that a lot of times out cleaning culverts. We can use it, a lot of roadside work. We got to repair some stuff. It's a nice machine to go out and ditch. I would not set that up with forks and a bunch of implements, other than maybe a thumb on the back. I'm trying to set it up so I can utilize the buckets off the 308 on the back. I wouldn't put forks on the front of it. The loader has a set of forks. The other machine, Bobcat machine, will have a set of forks. So I don't think we need our yard to look like a dealership with a bunch of equipment. So that would be number 4. Number 5, again, will be another snow fighter's truck, that class truck. Again, a lot of towns are spending a lot more money to fight snow. I think we're finding that, I can about do my run with 1 load of salt in the back of that thing. And I know if I tweak it a little bit more, I can get it down to 1 load of salt in the back of it. Plus it puts us under that CDL barrier. As you know, it's getting harder and harder to find people with CDLs. So this will, pretty much anybody can drive it. Not saying that anybody should drive it, but it would, open up a lot more doors for people, different people to operate this equipment moving forward. And then the addition will be another F-350 or equivalent setup with a plow and a sander on it. Again, this is just another nice piece that would take the weight off of, a simple task of running around town, going down doing guardrails, simple task, roadside work. We can throw hand tools in the back of it. We're not climbing in and out of the bigger trucks to do them tasks. That would be the thought behind that. Again, it's a lot cheaper per lane mile running that than it is a bigger truck. Everything that I've talked about, I'm campaigning and pushing for extended warranties. We had an issue with our loader. They just had a standard warranty. The new snow fighter truck had a 7-year warranty, extended warranty put on it. The backhoe will have an extended warranty. Everything, in my eyes, should have an extended warranty. We've tried to get a mechanic in here. That didn't go, we weren't able to fill that position. So I think moving forward, we must have everything with warranty. That's a better way to say it. If something goes wrong, it's just, we're blowing the budget on repairs, and it's just that money should be out fixing our streets rather than fixing our equipment. We're not mechanics, we're highwaymen. We should be out doing highway tasks. I think also this will give you an idea of what our fleet should look like if we can get there. I think as we update our fleet, it'd be nice to have the doors open, people come in, things are cleaned. We're learning to clean things, put them away. I think morale should go a lot higher. That would increase productivity out on the streets. It's just, the loss of man hours, loss of work hours, running back and forth, trying to get these trucks repaired. That's a lot of time that should be spent out on the streets, so.
I thought we bought several, or at least 2 big International Harvester trucks several years ago. And what was wrong with them?
One of them is still in the fleet right now. We just put some more money in that one. That one had some transmission issues. That one was getting fixed. And so that one will have to stay in the fleet for a little bit. We're hoping to be able to do a little sandblasting, repair, painting, follow through on that truck. The other truck, the motor went in the other truck. It didn't warrant putting the motor in it. That truck had a host of problems, was always over for repairs. I can't tell you exactly how much we put into the truck. I can tell you moving forward now, each truck we have, each piece of equipment we have at the highway garage has a folder in it now. I can open a folder. Each time I do an invoice for that truck, I copy it and I put it in that binder. So now we're tracking repairs on each vehicle. So I can't speak for how much we put in it prior years, but moving forward, I should be able to tell you.
Well, I can address that.
Yeah.
Neil, we spent, in my 3 years in office, we were spending enormous amounts of money on those relatively new trucks. And they would go in for maintenance and they would come out and literally it could be a week and they'd be back in the shop. So
Yeah,
it just kind of had a bad situation.
International Harvester.
Yeah, those are the trucks that each town had major issues with the gen system and stuff on it, and they broke down every time. We tried to get rid of them earlier, but with no success with previous people. But we there were definitely a maintenance issue every time they went out. But it was just the lemon truck. It wasn't much anybody could do about it.
Patrick, just quick one, Michael, you've got, is all the requests that Hugh just detailed in the yellow free cash column and on the?
Yes.
Yeah, so I believe our current plan, if this is kind of where we're going, I mean, I don't know if we voted on it yet, is that most, if not all of this equipment, we're planning on purchasing with free cash? Yes?
It's a possibility. Obviously, one of the reasons why, if you remember at the last meeting, it was asked that you prioritize it. Because one of the concerns, and actually this goes back to what Steve was saying before, is we'd be flipping over his fleet in 2 years, which means everything's gonna be timing out at about the same time.
But if we combine doing this because of all the problems with maintaining this old equipment with Diane's idea that we also should be funding, if this is 800,000 and the equipment is 7 or 8 years life cycle, why don't we not only fund this with free cash, but put in the budget 100,000 for the next 8 years, so that 8 years down the road, we've got it funded already.
Yeah, if you remember last year when I first came in, we ended up taking out a loan for the first truck. And the idea was that in year 4, we buy another, and then in year 4, we buy another, and then we cycle the other one
Yeah.
out. The problem is that we need to get in that, but the problem we ran into is the fleet's just falling apart so fast around Hugh that.
Right.
But then again, the danger is you're still buying all of your vehicles. Ideally would be.
If we fund it every year though, going forward, if we put 100,000 a year in, it doesn't matter when we buy them because you've always got the money available.
You're still figuring out how to come up with that money.
We need to deal with.
In an ideal world though, you would still have every 4 years a replacement, and then on year 12, you're cycling it out. So you would have your front line, your secondary force, and then your reserve fleet sort of in the highway. And you would cycle them out on the smaller trucks and that. But we have to think of how we're gonna approach this due to the fact that in a similar way, I don't know if we can wait a couple years to cycle in things.
Let me ask you a question, Hugh. You have aptly prioritized this equipment. We've got equipment, 5th and 6th priority of $607,000. We've got $250,000 in 5 and 6, in equipment 5 and 6, on your priority list. Is there any way that this equipment will give us some additional life so that we can capitalize it over a period of time instead of replacing everything all at once?
Are you talking about what we have right now or?
Yeah, what you have, what you have right now.
So I think, Jay, you're asking if you could not survive without doing number 5.
Oh, and 6.
And 6.
Correct.
So 5 was
Which one's the 2 trucks?
It's a plow truck. I mean.
Well, we do have the other one, and then the question is, in Hugh's mind, can we get a little more life out of this?
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, I don't know how to answer that. It's hard to go into a snowstorm boasting that you're ready and lose 2.5 trucks during that storm.
Yeah.
The one truck, we had an issue with it. We sent it out, got it fixed. We picked it up, we ran one load of stones, it broke down, we sent it out, had it fixed. We got the truck back and it snowed and he got from the highway garage to Prospect Hill, we had to have it towed. So I can't, best intent, I can tell you that everything has lights, everything has stickers, everything has good tires, everything has basic maintenance. Can I say something's gonna break? I can't say that, I can say moving forward that we're wanting to really maintain things, cleaning and greasing. I can't speak, just moving forward, we're learning how to take care of things. I can't say.
Well, Roxanne, I mean, first, a lot of this equipment is not going to die in the 4 or 5 years. The backhoe's going to last us, it'll last you 10, 15 years.
The backhoe.
So that's more than an issue. The dump trucks, I think we could start staggering them with 3 or 4 years. Maybe we could stagger, ones that maybe and get it staggered, but I don't see where we have to sit back and wait to stagger things and not have the equipment you need.
Like I said, the snow fighters will have that one has a 7 years. You can rotate it out within the 7 years. I'm sorry, right?
Keep one longer, one a little shorter. I mean, so we can get into rotating down the road, but right now we can't because you don't have anything to rotate.
Yeah, well, we're concerned about the safety issue. I mean, you're talking snowplow trucks, so there's a safety issue. I just have a question about your request also includes the new salt spreader and calibration equipment?
Yep.
Okay.
That will be on it. This particular build was kind of, or that particular snow fighter we just got last year was kind of what we had, what we jumped on, what was available. If we didn't get it, we'd still be waiting. Like I said, there was a few critiques in that build. One of them was being able to calibrate and track and Streamliners are so happy.
So, but then both of these plow trucks, the mid-size plow truck for 170,000 each, those would include
Right, to
updated
update,
equipment.
if we were to update a truck right now with that computer system, it's about $5,000, 5,500. But if we put it into the build, you're only seeing a couple grand increase. So that's the time to put that in there.
And that would save the use of salt.
It was, it
Allows
will
us to
educate us
monitor
how
the
to save
salt.
salt.
Yeah,
That's the key word. I don't think, it can't save it for us, but it can teach us or educate us how to save it.
Right, I mean, but in the long run, you'd be using less salt,
Yes.
which is
Potentially, yeah.
budget-wise and environmental-wise,
Environmental-wise,
very,
yes.
very
Do
effective.
we know what the lead time is to replace these vehicles? It goes anywhere from 6 months to well over a year.
I found trucks now. I can put my hands on trucks. I called a couple different vendors. One of them's Donovan's in New Hampshire. He told me 250 days out for a body.
It's almost a year.
SWAC was in September. We give him a chassis.
That may do your rotation just by when they come in.
Yes, and SWAC said they could have us a truck by September if we jump on a cab and chassis soon to get it to them. So we could have another snow fighter for this season.
I think we should go back to also the fire department conversation. We had 3 fires, but we had 250 EMT calls. This is one of the, what is it, the second oldest town in the Commonwealth? Look at that. I had an ambulance call in the past year for me personally. All right, this is going to increasingly impact us, and having safe plowed streets could be critical to safety of the residents of this town. And I absolutely think this is something we need to invest in as a public safety issue, let alone just like convenience of all of us who need to drive around on a snowy day.
I think we have to be, it seems to me we're going to have to be upfront with the town about the accumulated effect of deferred maintenance.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what's biting us in the butt now is deferred maintenance.
And it's going to cost us. And the town needs to be prepared because it's clear we can't put all of this off.
But we've also accumulated cash. That's why we're spending free cash to buy all this stuff.
Yeah. But I think if it's put that way and say, we're playing catch up, these are things we should have been doing. We should have been providing for depreciation. And
So this doesn't affect the tax rate.
so now, but, and that we, going forward, we are going to provide for depreciation. We are going to set up reserve funds on a regular basis to allow for replacement in an orderly fashion going forward. We can't just do the first without the second.
Oh, absolutely.
Not only that, but it's also the term of being compliant. We have to be compliant whether or not we have blue plates or standard commercial plates on our vehicles now going down the road, so that's a key thing is keeping our stuff compliant, so.
Okay, anything else for Hugh at this point? Michael, anything? Jim Bolfant, any other questions for Hugh?
No, I like Hugh's presentation, and I agree that we need to get these vehicles and get our town prepared. I just, it's not something we like to have to do right now, but I think it's something we have to do. That's my opinion.
Okay, anything else, Hugh?
No, as long as the board is satisfied, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephen Knopf,
Good evening.
Hi.
Parks and Recreation.
The patient Parks and Recreation. So I guess I'm here to, do you want me to walk through the requests or just answer questions? Not sure what.
Yes, walk through the request, please.
Do we have a screen to look at?
You have it listed in the capital.
In the capital.
Individual.
I can share my screen if you want me to.
Sure, you wanna,
So the capital, hold on, sorry.
I got the beach one right here.
Yeah, I'll share my screen. I've got it up on my screen. So the only request we made was for replacing the roof at the beach house. We had previously just applied to replace the skylights through community preservation, and we were awarded that money in CPA funds of 4,500, but the roof is definitely leaking and at least 20 to 30 years old. So we were requesting 25,000, which is only an estimate. We did not get quotes on this, but we can pursue getting quotes, and that would cover both the roof and the skylights.
Then, Steve, you also had a 5,700 one that as an article.
Yep, so because we need to do some engineering studies at the beach, which isn't a capital expense, of course, we were asking for $5,700, which is the quote that Foresight Land Services gave us to do a plan of the shoreline, which would include expanding the sand area, removing the weeds and rocks that are down there now, and building a separate path. Well, we'd relocate and reconfigure the kayak rack storage and build a path down to the water, which would link up with the canoe launch that's currently on Park Street, would be relocated to the beach. So the 5,700 being requested on the warrant is just for producing the engineering plans for that.
And that's the part that CPC could not fund, isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to understand the distinction because I know the CPC funds were to remove the Phragmites and replant with native species. So how does this, I mean, it seems like there's a little overlap. I'm not sure I understand.
It was the lawyers. The lawyers told us what CPC could and could not do, and the balance we put into the warrant article.
Exactly. We just need someone to produce a plan that can, demonstrate what the end objective is for the shoreline.
Okay, so this is just an overall engineering plan.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
CPC will cover the work, once we get started on it, but not the plans.
Okay. And I have another question about the roof. Have you considered not having skylights?
So great question. There's no electrical lighting in the bathhouse, which typically the beach opens at sunrise and closes at sunset, although we don't enforce it by closing the parking lot or anything. But when the cleaning person goes early in the morning, sometimes it's too dark for them to effectively see what needs to get cleaned. So the skylight was providing the natural light during the day, but we have nothing for pre-dawn and post-sunset hours. So we are considering adding some lighting as part of this project as well. But without the skylights, then you would have to have lights on all the time. So,
Well, I'm wondering, why couldn't you have lights like we have in Town Hall? In other words, they're not on unless someone is physically there. And have you balanced the cost and the inconveniences of skylights, because they do tend to leak, against putting in additional lighting that's smart enough to know there's no one there and they're off?
Is there electric to that building?
Yes.
Yes, there is.
So, yeah, I would kind of push to get rid of the skylights and install lights. The skylights are nothing but issues.
Yeah, and those skylights, when we first got quotes to replace them, we found out that they were custom built. In other words, they're not.
And that makes them leak more.
Right.
I tried that once.
Yeah. So it wasn't like we could just buy something off the shelf to replace them, of course, which held up the whole project to begin with. So yeah, we would definitely consider that option.
I would highly recommend that.
Yeah, I would too. I mean,
Okay.
you can see there's a quorum of the select board that have experience with skylights.
I did not.
Stephen, I have a question. I can't put my finger on it, but I understand that there is an interest in adding a position to Parks and Recreation. You want to share with us what you have in mind there?
Sure. So we are looking to add a salaried person who would take their priorities of work to be performed from Parks and Recreation, but under the supervision of Hugh in the Highway Department. What we didn't quite specify, I think, was, our preference would be to have someone year round, but in the wintertime, they would be part of Hugh's crew. In the summertime, they would address a lot of things at the beach that Hugh can't get to from, if there's storm cleanup or other things that have to happen around town. So it would really be essentially an add to staff to DWP, but with direct or dotted line supervision under Parks and Rec.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Hey, Steve, we just had a conversation around adding, I don't know, close to $1 million worth of equipment to highway, which will by definition increase their efficiency, a lot less time maintaining things and a lot more time doing things. And I would love, this is no reflection on the importance of the priority of getting this work done, but if we're gonna fund that, it would be great to see if it actually does result in improved efficiencies before we also add to the staffing of the highway department. Because I think what's possible is that by having equipment that works most or all of the time, we will be able to more efficiently address what some of your concerns are with the staffing levels that we have now.
That's a great point. Yeah. I mean,
We'll be in a better situation this year. With COVID, it's been difficult to hire summer help. And so clearly we want to be staffed up in the summer, which again, makes some people available from the highway department to address all the Parks and Rec issues.
Michael?
Yeah, one thing I would point out, last year, I know he was dealing with basically a 4-man crew. We're up to a 5-man crew. And I spoke to the superintendent about advertising towards seniors. We're going to have 2 40-hour positions in the highway department, seasonal. So if we're up to a full complement where he has 7 staff members over the summer, I think that also plays into it. And that's been difficult to achieve in the last couple.
Yeah, I would recommend waiting a year to see how this plays out.
I have a question.
Jim has his hand up.
Go ahead, Hugh.
Jim.
Oh, Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, Steve, do you have any idea what the square footage of that, the bathhouse building is, beach house? How large is it?
I have that in a file somewhere, but it's not on my fingertips, so I don't remember.
Well, the reason I asked that is $25,000 to repair simply a roof. It has to be a pretty big building to cost $25,000. I think.
No, great point. So to us, that was sort of the worst case. We were going to look into putting a metal roof on there that had a longer lifetime.
Yes.
So that was the reason for the 25,000.
Can you get real soon, get a price on a metal roof without the skylights?
But with the electrical,
but with the
And what's the electrical?
added lighting.
So we know what we're talking about? I agree with the metal roof, but it's,
does it look good?
Yeah,
Oh,
oh
yeah, look
yeah,
great.
they're beautiful.
Oh, they are.
So
Yeah.
We could try to get that information. The other thing is that if this was a free cash specifically for only the roof, whatever money's not used, then the following year, we would have available to
To say
reappropriate for
you
something
got
else.
CPC money for that roof or not?
They got some.
Okay.
Didn't they
Yeah.
say?
Yes.
They got some.
Did they got money for the beach.
They got a couple.
Can't use CBC for maintenance if it's
Let's
maintaining the
see,
roof.
let him answer.
Do we have a job description for the position that he's talking about? And it would seem to me that we need a job description and basically how the function had been performed to date, you know.
Up in Hewitt.
Real quick, the highways really enjoyed working with Parks and Recs.
Right.
It's starting to bond very good. To touch base on the 25,000 on the roof, I think the concern was we didn't know what was under the roof because there's so much leaking. And by the time you do the roof, fascia and soffit and seal it right.
Catch up.
I think, Steve, I think the thing, we wanted to look a little better, giving money back and asking for more. So I think that's why it seems a little high. I don't think it's gonna touch that. It shouldn't, but we don't know what's under the leak.
But now we kind of know we're pushing for the metal roof out the skylights, maybe you can get a little more accurate.
Right,
price.
yep.
You know, we know we're not going to get a exact price, but.
Right, I was up there that windy day measuring the skylights. They're 4x4, they're non-mechanical. I don't think Lux offers a $1 skylight like that. So I didn't measure the size of the roofs.
Yeah, you gotta get rid of the skylights.
Yeah, and also as far as the position, the guy that does maintain it does a wonderful job. He's very efficient, but also highway, we do have a daily log now. So maybe we can use that to piggyback how much time is spent doing these activities. So moving forward.
So next year we know what we have.
Justify this position.
Perfect.
Absolutely. Great.
So if you need it or don't need it, either way, yes.
Right.
Yes.
We'll have data.
I believe, and I'll look for it, but I believe Nicole did submit a job description to you last year. I don't know if Michael, you recall seeing that too, but I'll see if I can dig that up. It was in the
You
form
should
of,
bring that forward, Stephen.
yeah. Okay.
Anything else for Parks and Recreation? Thank you very much, Stephen.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Michael, let's see, what time do we have?
It's 9 o'clock.
It's almost 9 o'clock.
Maybe we take a break and motion to adjourn maybe and pick this up next week?
I think we can run through the operating budget pretty quickly, if.
It's up to the commission.
Let me just summarize what we've heard of the operating budget. The operating budget, to summarize, if you will, including education, is $753,470 increase over FY 2022. The bulk of that increase is attributable to 3 or 4 items. Number one is ambulance service, which we have received from Lennox and Lee, an additional increase of $283,000. The next item is obviously the capital and operating educational budget, which was presented by Peter Dillon. And the educational budget is $433,000. So $433,000 and $280,000. That's.
The ambulance is up 13,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the 281 is
The total.
the total. Jeff.
Oh, I'm sorry. Forgive me. That's, so it's $433,000 increase with respect to education. I did make a mistake relative to the ambulance, which is up only $13,000. So
If there's one thing I'd like to go over with the boards, the select board went over this, but the revenues, we didn't go over with the finance committee.
Go ahead.
And I think it's a little key to this discussion. So in the budget sheet, you'll see that we have a revenue revenue line, and these are categories that, all the different categories that the town, I'm gonna hide a couple of these so I can get them on. There.
And it's the last tab, correct?
Yes.
Here.
I need to get rid of 2 more. Let's find these. There we go. All right.
There.
So typically in a year, we have our local estimated receipts, motor vehicle charges, water and sewer, excise, all the different fees, building fees, all the rest that we collect. During the COVID years, you can see that we dropped our budget number for total down to 1.3 in expectations that COVID would hit, especially motel taxes, meals taxes, things like that. It didn't really happen. That's what's generated, why we've generated more free cash in the last couple. So what I had brought up to the select board was basing this column right here is a 3-year average of what we've been, or 4-year average of what we take in these different categories. And what I wanted to do was take 85% of that and budget it going forward, which would bring our amount, would increase our local receipts next year by almost 700,000. Now, if you'll see the bottom one, I'm not doing it for non-reoccurring, because by definition, that's just money that comes in, you're never sure. If I still add up those other fields, other years, on your spreadsheets, I sent it to you. If you go back, you'll see that there was 1 year, we had a non-reoccurring of 300,000 back, like, I think it was 3 years ago. I'm not sure why, but it sort of throws off that category. So typically you always say non-reoccurring is 0. We put all the rest at 85%, and then we put meals and hotels, meals and rooms at 100%, because we also went up, as Patrick pointed out, and Roxanne.
Well, your numbers are different.
That we're gonna go to 100% because we're going up to 6% on the meals and rooms tax.
Right.
So you guys brought that up.
You sent me this
Looks like you
earlier
brought-
this week. Okay, that's fine.
I did I not send it?
It's not updated, that's okay.
Oh, I apologize.
All right.
I'll resend it to make sure everybody has this. So even though the overall budget right now is projected to go up 730,000, we'd be raising the local receipts by 700,000.
So
Now,
it's
somebody
virtually
might
a
ask,
wash.
what would that typically do to free cash? It would still bring in 300,000 based on the average of the last 4 years. But if we're correct that with the extra 2% in meals and rooms, this number will probably be closer to 400 to 500, which puts you back to what you guys were traditionally bringing in free cash revenue. So I think it's worth noting that. So we do have this number also playing in. So we have a bunch of things that are all breaking the right direction for this upcoming year.
And remember, a 2% increase was really a 50% increase over the old rate. It went from 4 to 6.
4 to 6.
So, it's a giant. I mean, in the 2019, we had 420,000. That was the last pre-COVID year. I think we had 420,000 in revenue, actual revenue, 430,000 between meals and room. So if that goes up by 50%, that's 600,000 plus and that's at 2019 prices. Prices have also gone up for these rooms and these meals.
But you got to look at, the fiscal year 21 was estimated at 275. The actual was almost 315.
Right.
So we did not drop significantly.
No.
We did very well. And now we've upped it from 4 to 6%. So
Yeah, I think I sent it around with, and I'm sorry, not 85, at 80%. I did send it around at 80%, but I updated meals and rooms to the 100.
Okay.
So I will send you around the new one with 100%, but it's one of those things that we really should be generating back to what we did before with our free cash.
What was the impact on the tax rate of making this decision?
So by making that decision, what it did is it moves that the tax rate right now is estimated to go up on the average value of a single family home. And I know some people contacted us about this because it's always dangerous. There will be sections of the town that go up considerably more based on value.
The rate's the same though. What's the rate?
The rate right now would go up to $944 based on the budget that we have in front of us right now. And we're currently at $938.
But that is the operating budget only, and it doesn't include any capital.
Right, it doesn't include.
The capital is a separate issue.
It's a separate issue.
Okay, I want to make that perfectly clear. Okay.
But like I said, yeah, there were some people that saw there was a category of homes that went up 18% in value. And there were other categories of home that only went up 3%. So when the tax rate adjusts, as Mike Blay likes to put it, 1/3 of the town goes down, 1/3 stays level, and 1/3 goes up typically. And depending on what category of home you're in, that's how that would play out.
Okay.
But these are the numbers that we plugged in last year. We thought we'd come in around I think it was 950 something. We ended up at 938. So we think that right now we're projecting a tax rate of 944.
Okay.
Just one thing.
Peter?
Just to share, before I mentioned the money we're returning to the town, that's $76,436.93.
So that'll show up in that non-recurring. It'll become a calculation for next year's.
It's going to be 94 cents to help us out.
I think we might want to take a break at this point. What's the feeling of?
How much more we got?
Take a break and resume, or?
Well, we didn't go through any of the articles.
It's a 1-week break.
We didn't go through any of the articles, and we haven't really discussed, some of the capital items, whether it's we use cash or finance. So I don't know how much time you want to spend this evening.
I move to adjourn.
What?
I move to adjourn.
And I can just tell people the timeline. So with town meeting where it is, in a perfect world, we'd be trying to have everything wrapped up by the end of this month, the meeting on the 28th. So there's just.
It could be next Thursday.
I think we should meet that meeting
Oh,
on
yeah.
Thursday, so.
Next Thursday. And that'll be the primary, it'll be the articles and the financing of the articles.
We'll make decisions
Yeah.
When would we do that? What day?
next Thursday.
Thursday?
Yeah, same time, same place.
Yeah, okay.
We'll finalize everything next Thursday.
Yep.
So that'll be the 14th.
14.
All right, we had a motion, second,
Second.
all in favor?
I can second right your meeting, but.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Here.